And now time for our regular slot where we recommend a table for two, somewhere we've dined out which we think you might enjoy. And also, if you'd like a cheeky glass or two or something when you're dining there, a place to stay nearby, which might just fit the bill in terms of being able to walk there after you've enjoyed your meal, where we've initially recommend you go.
We'll be shining the spotlight on fabulous things happening in hospitality in the Southwest and talking to talented people from the industry. And we're proudly sponsored by Southwest 660, the iconic road trip stretching from Poole in Dorset to Watchet in Somerset. And at my table this week, I'm delighted to say, is Phillip Newman-Hall, a man steeped in hospitality. Now based in Taunton and happily retired, Phillip has had an amazing career in the industry. He was previously Director General Manager of Raymond Blanc's Le Manoir aux Quatre de Saison for nearly 12 years, and prior to that, he was Director of Operations for Richard Branson's Virgin Hotels in the UK. Since retiring from full-time employment, he's also worked with a number of clients in a consultancy role, but has latterly wound this down. But he's still an ambassador for hospitality action, and at the end of the phone for friends who may need someone to bounce ideas off. So I can't think of someone better to talk to about hospitality in the Southwest and the bigger picture. So let's get into it and talk to Phillip. Hi Phillip, and thanks so much for joining me. I'm really glad you could come on the podcast.
Hi Andy, no, it's great to have the opportunity to be at your table.
Yes, thank you very much. One of the reasons I invited you on, and perhaps the primary reason, is just to hear your fantastic life story in terms of hospitality, and you did make your way right to the very top of the industry in your particular field. So perhaps you could open up by telling us your career in hospitality and your life story to get there.
All right, this could take a long time. Age 15, teenage boy, growing up in Eastbourne in Sussex, needed a summer job. Lots of hotels in Eastbourne, so I walked along to the seafront. You can turn left, you can turn right, or you can go straight on and get wet. I turned right, went into a hotel. They offered me a summer job as a waiter, and I never left the industry. It's as simple as that. Sometimes life just puts you on a pathway that you have no idea you're going to go on, and you find it's the one that suits you. It was the first time in my life that I'd been told by people I was quite good at doing something. At school in those days, we're talking 1971, people told you what you would never do in life, and I was always told I'd be useless at everything, really. Went to work as a waiter for the summer in a hotel in Eastbourne. And I found that if you looked after people and you dealt with them in a great way, and you communicated with them and you served them at that time, they actually gave you money at the end of the week when they left as a tip. And I'd never realised that this sort of thing happened. And I just found that I fitted in. And luckily the owners of the hotel then and the manager there saw my potential. I was leaving school at 16. I had no idea what I wanted to do. He offered me a position of a trainee manager, the youngest they'd ever had apparently. I started in the kitchen. I really enjoyed the kitchen. I thought this was my career. Unfortunately, I contracted dermatitis on my hands through handling flour and meat. I therefore couldn't stay in the kitchen, so he put me on a full management training scheme. The hotel got taken over by THF as well at about that time. And I soon found myself at sort of 17, in fact, being the duty manager. No, I wasn't even old enough to serve in the bar, yet I was looking after the hotel on a Sunday night. And it went on from there. I worked with THF for a number of years, went to work in a hotel in Banbury after Eastbourne, then went over to France as a waiter for a while in the Loire Valley in 1977. Came back from there, rejoined THF. Got promoted to assistant manager in a hotel in Banbury again, went back there. Then applied to work for George Goring's family at that point, who owned the Spa Hotel in Tunbridge Wells as well as the Goring in London. Went there as deputy manager, did that for 4 years. Managed to boot the manager out and became general manager myself for 4 years. From there, I then moved up to a hotel called the George of Stamford in Lincolnshire. Brilliant hotel for food and service at that time. Private owners, and a managing director called Ivo Vanocci, who really taught me the way of never saying no to a guest. If we didn't have a table in the restaurant, he'd lay a table on the stairs, and it was just an amazing experience. From there, I then went to work for Richard Branson's Virgin Group at a hotel in North Yorkshire called Craythorne Hall Hotel. I was asked to change the ethos of that hotel. He bought it not long before then. The AA had already said it was going to be downgraded from 4-star to 3-star. I stayed there for 4 years and it became AA Hotel of the Year. So it was just changing the ethos and changing how you do things. From there, Virgin then made me director of operations for all the hotels they had in the UK, 8 hotels at that point. 4 years later, Richard decided to sell the UK hotels. He didn't want to sell me as well, so he paid me to go away. So I took a year off, and whilst I was on my year off, I went escorting tour groups to China, of all things.
Wow.
It's amazing if you just talk to people, you can do things. It's amazing what you can do. Whilst I was in China, my wife decided that it was time to start looking for jobs again, and she got me an interview at the Manoir Quatre Saisons with Raymond Blanc. I said, why me? I've never done 5-star, I've never done Michelin star food. And she said, no, they want to see you. So I went for the interview, and there were 2 very, very respected hoteliers in the final interview as well, and I knew I had no chance of getting the job. And then Raymond phones me a few days later and offers me the job. So stayed there for 5 years running the Manoir, which was an amazing experience. It opened doors that I'd never seen open before. Did 5 years and then decided I couldn't do no more. When I went, the Manoir had just gone through a stage of refurbishment, and I had to reposition it from being a restaurant with rooms to a hotel with a stunning restaurant, and it was just changing the emphasis of the building because they doubled in size in the number of bedrooms. As I say, did that for 5 years, then just decided to take a break and work for myself for a while. So did a lot of consultancy, which also ended up me being working again for Richard and Virgin. I ended up in Necker Island. I ended up in Ula Saba, which is a game lodge in South Africa. I helped open Casbah Tamadot, which is a hotel in Morocco. And so did that for five years. And then Raymond contacted me again, as I said, look, we need to change managers again. Would you come back? And I said no. And I did another 6.5 years with him.
Very persuasive man.
Yeah, we had a very good relationship, I have to say. So as I did 6.5 years, and then I was reaching 60 and decided I just wanted to slow down a bit and change my direction of life. So again, left there, and now here we are 10 years later nearly. I've done 5 years of consultancy, and I now just do a little consultancy, but not very much, and enjoying loving life in the West Country.
And what prompted the move to the West Country? Had you always got your eye on coming this way?
Yeah, we always thought we'd move down to the southwest. We've been going to a National Trust property in Cornwall on holidays on the north coast near Port Isaac, Port Quinn, for 40 years really, and we've always liked it down there. And we always thought we'd move to Cornwall, but then if I was still going to do consultancy, I wanted good connectivity. We looked at Taunton, thought the railway was there, the transport links were there. It was still 2 hours to Cornwall, I could still go on holiday. And we came to look down here to rent a house for a while whilst we decided where we'd go to. And we looked at a house that was on a new development, and instead of renting it, we bought the first one we saw. We only looked at one house. We've now been in it nearly 10 years. Taunton is a wonderful base for getting to the West Country, doing things in the West Country, and the connections to London, to wherever you want to go to. It's a really good base. I think it's a very underrated town, but I could go on about that for a long time as well.
Sure, and there's some lovely spots around there to dine, which I'm sure we'll probably touch on. But That has been, by any yardstick, a stellar career, and I'm in awe of some of the places and some of the experiences you've clearly had. And one of the things that came across when we were corresponding ahead of me interviewing you is that you passionately believe, don't you, that service, perhaps as well as housekeeping, is one of the most overlooked areas of hospitality.
Yes. Yeah. I'll stick to service because housekeeping is a different side. I think just a
Sure.
little bit about housekeeping. Housekeeping's room attendants have the hardest job in all of a hotel. No one has a harder job to me than that. They have to turn rooms around in a very, very short space of time, and they have to be perfect for the next guest to come in. And they're because they're usually up on the floor up here, and the hotel's glamour is all on this floor down here. They're overlooked up there. So a very, very underrated part of the industry. Service,
Sure.
service to me, you remember how you were treated. You may not remember what you ate, what you paid for your meal, even if it's an extortionate price, but you do remember how you were treated. So the art of service is not just putting a plate on the table. It is very much the art of empathizing with the people who are in your restaurant, in your bar, in whatever you're serving. Service is a really, really important part of the industry, and so often you see people saying, "Oh, I just got it's just a waiter, it's just a server, it's just a barman." It's not just that. Those people are your salespeople. They're the people who will make your profit for you, and they need to be developed and mentored and praised, and they needed to be lauded, really.
And do you think service can be taught, or is it intuitive?
I think it's a mixture of both. I think you've got to have that passion for pleasing people anyway in the first place. You've got to be able to talk to people. You've got to be able to understand people without necessarily talking to them. You've got to understand body language an awful lot. And I think body language and understanding body language is something that has to be taught. You can't necessarily pick it up at a simple stage. I think I said to you as we were talking, you could have a restaurant with six tables in it, six tables of two. They could all eat exactly the same meal, all eat exactly, drink exactly the same wine, and they'd all have a completely different experience because it's the mood they come into that restaurant in that will dictate how much they enjoy their evening. The young couple who are out on the first date, the two businessmen together, the couple who are the grey pound, the couple who've had a row, they're all going to have a really different impression of that evening. And the member of staff who's serving them and looking after them and hosting them has to nearly understand why they're there in the first place, but also what sort of day they've had. The two businessmen who are signing a deal don't want to be interrupted every 5 minutes. And was your main course all right? The inane questions that we get asked when we're in restaurants nowadays, which are a tick list, don't work. You've got to understand what people are there for and leave them alone if they want to be left alone. To me, one of the most annoying things is you've had your main course has been put down. You're not even a minute into it, and somebody comes up and says, "Is everything all right with your food?" Well, that's not the time to ask the question, quite honestly. And it's those things, it's those nuances of service that need to be worked on, and sometimes they can only be trained, and you have to role play perhaps on a lot of those things to understand it. But intuitive servers know what's going on. And it's also the other bit I would say that great restaurateurs, hoteliers allow their teams to make their own decisions on things as well. Can I give you an example?
Of course, I'd love you to.
I don't know if you read Danny Mayer's book, Setting the Table. Danny Mayer.
I haven't. It's now on the list.
All right, okay. Danny Mayer is a New York restaurateur, has some of the best restaurants in New York, Union Street Cafe, Gramercy Tavern, things like that. In one of his books, I think it's in Setting the Table, he gives this example of a lady who was serving a table of, I don't know, four businessmen or something like that, and she overhears them saying, "Oh, during the main course, oh, I can't wait to cheese. Really looking forward to some cheese this evening." This restaurant does not serve cheese, so she tells somebody, I'm sneaking next door. There's a delicatessen 2 doors down the road. She goes and buys cheese herself with her own money. So when they come to order cheese, they get cheese. Now,
Sure.
obviously her boss realised what was going on and paid for the cheese in the end. But it's somebody who can hear something like that and think, I can sort that out before it even becomes an issue. And to me, that's services going that extra bit to make certain that everybody has such a great time.
And you posited to me that you could probably have a moderate food experience, which could be elevated by a good service
Yeah.
experience, but not the other way around.
Yeah, I have always believed, and I have told everyone, when I've done my training with people, I've always said you can hide poor or mediocre food behind great service. You can't hide poor service behind great food. You can just ruin great food by having poor service. And
Sure.
and so that's where the interaction between the chefs and the front of house staff is also so important, and the chefs have to understand how important this is as well. Somebody taking a plate of food from the kitchen to the table to the guest is not just somebody carrying a plate. They're the next part of your delivery of food to the guests. They're part of that total performance.
And talk to me about your consultancy because it's interesting to me. I mean, I think in some walks of life, I've worked in media for most of my life, and latterly, some consultants I've had the pleasure of experiencing haven't overly impressed me. But clearly, it's been a success for you being a consultant. And I'm interested in the nitty gritty of that. Do you go into failing hotels or hotels that need to step up their game or a change in their offering, or is it a mixture?
It is a mixture. It's often people who have nothing to do with the industry who've decided to buy a hotel or a restaurant and then realize that it's not as easy to do it as they think it is. Or it might be, again, a private owner who is struggling and is not getting the returns on the investment that they used to get. I've It can be quite frustrating being a consultant as opposed to being a manager of a hotel. If you're a manager of a hotel, your teams generally do what you want them to do because that's you've trained them and they develop and they do what they want to do. If you go in as a consultant, the owner can listen to you, you can advise them. Whether they take any notice of that advice is up to them. And I have in the past found that quite frustrating that people are paying me very good money to spend my time trying to help them and then they ignore you completely. I'm not saying they all do that, but it has happened. So yes, it tends to be I go in, I'll work with the teams for a while just to see what's going on. It might take a week of understanding the operation as it is, and then we'd probably sit down and look at particular areas that needed work and work with those teams from then on to try and drive the business forward. But some of it's been opening things as well, so it's not necessarily been existing things. I have also helped on openings as well.
We'll pick up with Philip later. And now for our news of the week, and great news it is too. A welcome return for a familiar face. Familiar in the sense that he's been quite well known to those of us who follow the foodie scene in the Southwest anyway, and he's returning to a rather familiar stable. I talk about a chap called Ian Webber, great chef. I've followed his career very successfully over the years and enjoyed eating at the various places where he was a chef. He started off at Gidley and he's moved on and done things like working at the Jack in the Green, and he worked at the Five Bells at Clistheiden, which was a great gastro pub I enjoyed visiting when it was still open, sadly no longer with us. And also latterly he's been up at the Farmer's Arms at Wolseley, the amazing spot up there, which is a sort of ecosystem for hospitality and sort of produce lovers, and well worth a trip in its own right. But I'm pleased to say it was announced this week that Ian is returning to Gidley. Fantastic news, because Gidley is one of those places that we need to cherish in the Southwest. It's always had a great reputation. Lots of great chefs have been through there, the likes of Michael Caines, Michael Wignall, Chris Eden latterly was there, and they've always kept 1 or 2 Michelin stars going there, which was a signifier of just how wonderful it is. I must admit it's been on my list to return to for a little while now and long overdue, and now Ian's back. his natural place, I reckon. It'll be a lovely opportunity to go back there and see his talent in the most appropriate of elegant and luxurious settings. So good luck to Ian, and I'm sure Gidley will continue to be one of those stellar spots that lovers of hospitality flock to.
And now time for our regular slot where we recommend a table for two.
This episode, I'm returning in a way to my West Country roots. First moved down to the West Country in 1997 and lived in North Devon for a number of years. And favourite little spot over there is the sort of Torridge estuary, which sort of stretches from Barnstaple down to Bideford. And Appledore is one of those gorgeous little seaside coastal fishing villages that Devon seems to specialise in. And there's a great pub on the front at Appledore called the Royal George. I remember it well from years ago when we used to pop in there when it was a slightly interesting place, let's put it like that, but it's latterly been taken over in the last few years, and I'm just back from a trip there. I mean, the views are gorgeous from that part of the world anyway, but as we well know, having great views and a fairly rubbish pub experience is not an ideal combination. But our visit to the Royal George was superb. Great staff. I was running a bit late, to be honest with you, and they gave me a quick call, which is their prerogative, and were lovely about the fact that I was been a bit of a klutz and cocked up the time we were arriving. But when we did arrive, table in the window, those magnificent windows looking out over that estuary, which is just fabulous, whatever the weather. And the food, marvellous. Had a great Sunday roast there, but looking at the rest of the menus for the week, they really do care about the provenance and put some passion into their food. And you can tell the cheese board was sensational, lots of options there and some thought been put into it. They've even got a sign saying I love beer, which is good enough for me, and they really support local breweries, and it's a fantastic opportunity there just to sit back, relax, or enjoy some great food. And if you're staying over and you want a place to stay, which we always recommend nearby, I'm going to go for another pub in Appledore, the Seagate. It's a very well-known pub right there on the front. Young's Brewery took it over a few years back and kind of enhanced a place that was good already. Food's good there as well, to be honest with you. You're very sport for choice if you live in the Appledore area or you're in the region itself while you're visiting. But the Seagate's great. It's got a good menu and lots of options. Good for breakfast in my memory when I stayed over there a couple of years ago, and I've been back recently just to have a check it out, and it's still the same as ever. They've got some fantastic cutesy rooms upstairs, and they've also actually got a sort of separate accommodation block a few streets down with some apartments there, so you can have that different kind of self-catering experience if you want, just a little way along the street there on the main drag in Appledore. So Appledore, head there. It's worth a visit anyway for the views, but two great places to dine out and one where you can stay and really enjoy yourselves. And now back to Philip. Can you ever turn off that all-seeing eye? Because I know when I go to a new town or a new community, I pick up a local magazine or a local newspaper and critique it. If you, and we'll talk a little bit later in the podcast about some of your favourites, but if you go to places, can you switch off the career man in you?
I'm much better than I used to be. For years, my wife used to put me facing the wall when we ate in a restaurant or a hotel, and yes, I care, and I think one of the biggest things about looking after people is caring about them. So it's not just caring about their careers and their futures and their development and their potential, but it's caring about the surroundings. It's caring about the produce that you're using. It's caring about the equipment that you're using. It's caring that you walk into a room and every light bulb is lit. If you talk to some of my teams that I've had in the past, they would say, I'm a nightmare when it comes to light bulbs, because there is no excuse for anybody looking at a room and not seeing a light bulb is out before a service starts. However, there is a great difference between looking and seeing. And so therefore, some people look, they don't necessarily see. But it's if you do the minutiae, if you do the attention to detail, the big things just happen. The small things are what wind guests up more than anything. So it's the glass that's got a lipstick stain on it still is an unforgivable thing in a restaurant. It should just never happen. It's those little things that will really set the tone. So if the first thing you see when you sit down, especially a lady, and sees lipstick on a glass, they're not going to have a good evening. You've nearly ruined the whole thing before they've sat down. So attention to detail, caring, and I know we talked about this. I think one thing we've lost in the industry in the past few years, and I'm hoping it's coming back because I am seeing it more, is what I would call MBWA, management by walking about. You cannot manage a restaurant, a hotel. I don't think you manage any organisation actually if you don't walk the walk, talk the talk, walk the floor, see what people are doing, praise people, catch people doing things right, and give them praise when you see them doing things right. Praise in public, do the other behind the closed door. It's got to be, you want people to feel proud of working for you. You want people to be proud of their product they're putting on the plate. You want people to feel proud that the last guest that leaves that restaurant is going to go and say, wow, I had a great time there. If I'm talking about leaving restaurants, one thing that I also get annoyed about is the goodbye. Restaurants, hotels are brilliant at welcoming people normally. They deal with that really well. How many times have you sat in a restaurant and tried to pay the bill and there's nobody around? So somebody, I know staff have got to go off duty. You've got to, in the days of high costs of everything now, if you can save a quarter an hour here, then that's fine. But there's got to be a method that there's still people around to do the goodbye in exactly the same way as they did the hello, and take people's money and finish it off in the way you want it to be. You want, yeah, and it happens all the time, and I watch it happening in restaurants, and it just, that annoys me.
Sure. And I think, one of the things we notice when we're lucky enough to dine out is I think within 5-10 minutes, you recognise whether the venue's got what I call the all-seeing eye. And this is the person you spoke about who sees that table 2 look a bit jumpy, that things haven't gone right. And so many places seem to scrimp on that these days and give a server just a number of tables to work at without someone having that overview.
Yes. Where's the old head waiter, as it would have been and as I was coming along, or the to go back to classical French style of restaurants, where you'd have the demi-chef de rang who would be sort of doing the serving, and the chef de rang who would look after all the tables, and then there'd be the head waiter or the assistant head waiter and the head waiter and then the restaurant manager. So, and those levels have been taken out. So you're right. You're not seeing, there aren't those people who are watching in the same way. However, there are still some properties, and especially when you get to the sort of the high Michelin star properties, where those levels are obviously still there, and it works. But most of us don't go to those properties.
No. And talking of Le Manoir, let's talk about your 2 periods there. I mean, it was probably one of the world's, UK's, Europe's best hospitality venues. Rightly got a reputation. Raymond Blanc is a star name. It must have been wonderful working there over the course of your career.
Yeah, it was. I was very, very fortunate. It, as I said earlier, it opened doors for me. It sent me around the world. It enabled me to meet people I would never have met in my life. One evening, Tony Blair was coming in for dinner with Sherry Blair. It was their anniversary, so he arrived before her. They'd come from different directions. He goes and sits in the bar. He's the only person in the bar. I go, and obviously I've welcomed him, walk him through to the bar, sit him down, and he spends 10 minutes just talking to me. Now,
wow.
No, and I understood why he did so well as a politician, because he looked me in the eye for all those 10 minutes. He didn't try and look at anybody else. He didn't try and see who was over my shoulder. It was all, he was talking to me.
Sure.
So yes, there are things like that happened.
And you told me about a rather amusing experience with a guest who had to give up his table.
Yeah, the Queen Mother and Raymond got on very well together. I do believe, and I never saw it. It was before my time. He got the Queen Mother actually standing on a chair singing the Marseillaise at one point, but that's another matter. So yes, the Queen Mother. She I think she was 101, and she was coming for lunch for a table of 6, and trying to make it easy for her, because she was walking with sticks by this point, and So she went for a drink in the garden, and we put her on the table, which was nearest to the garden door, and it was easy for her to get in. Also, security, she could be seen from inside and outside. We had a very regular guest who was coming for lunch the same day, who always had this same particular table. And so I said to the team, the team was saying, well, what are we going to do? Because he wants that table, and we've got to put her there. I said, well, no, obviously I'll go and meet him and say, can't have his table on this day. And so I met him at the door. Hello, Mister, welcome back. And just to let you know, today you're not going to be on your usual table. And you could see him going. It was like steam coming out of his ears before I. And so let me explained why he wouldn't be on that table, but the Queen Mother was going to be on the table next to him, and he'd be on the table next to her, and I was certain he wouldn't mind giving up his table for the Queen Mother. By the time he sort of got into the bar, he was like butter melting in my hands, and I'm certain he's been dining out ever since on the story that he gave up his table for the Queen Mother.
Perfect. And that shows the intuition and the capacity to handle a situation, which I guess you've just learned over all those years of working in top class restaurants.
Yes, and it's also I'll give you another example. Perhaps is don't make your staff have to deal with difficult situations that are beyond their capabilities. So I had a situation. We used to valet park cars at the Manoir, and I had a lovely guy called Ben who he went on to be manager of many hotels after all this. He was valet parking a guest's Aston Martin, and he went too fast in it in the car park and took the sump off the bottom of the Aston Martin valet parking the car.
Ouch.
He comes into me, quite shaken, but at least he came to me and said, "Philip, I need to tell you something." So he told me what had happened. He said, I'll go and tell the guests." I said, "No, you won't. That's way beyond your pay grade. If that sort of thing has happened, do not send him to go and do it. It's not his. Okay, it's his fault. It's happened perhaps, but it's not his. He doesn't have the skills to deal with that, shall we say? So in the meantime, I went to see the guests, told them what had happened, told the guests what we would do about it, because if you've got a problem like that, face it straight on. 1, we'd get them home. 2, we'd get their car taken to an Aston Martin place. 3, we'd pay for it, obviously, and deal with it all. We'd get hire a car for them for the period of the time the car was away, and their lunch on it was free on us on that day, obviously. And they were absolutely fine about it. But
yes,
you can't expect a kid. I think he was probably 20. Well, I said kid. He was probably 20 at that time, to have to face that sort of situation. Management is about taking responsibility and being seen to take that responsibility when you need to take that responsibility. And if you don't do things like that, then I think your team see it and they don't respect you. So I know that any member of my team were confident in coming to me and saying, "We've got an issue. How can I help? How can we deal with it? What should I do?"
Completely.
And so often you see and I've seen it in restaurants where you're complaining about something. The head waiter doesn't come to see you. He sends a waiter back to see you. I want to see the person at the top. I want to see the colour of his eyes sometimes and say, "This is what's wrong. It's up to you to sort it out, not up to this person to sort it out."
Yes, you're being paid to deal with this issue.
Precisely, yeah. I was being paid $3, he wasn't.
Yeah. And we touched briefly on you off duty, and I'm interested, given your lifelong experience in the industry, in the Southwest, where are some of your favourites to dine?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Although I've worked in the 2 Michelin star, that sort of market, I won't say it's my favourite market to go and eat in myself. I'll do it occasionally, but down here at the moment, we do go down to Cornwall a lot, and we do go down to Padstow. I've went to Rick Stein's before Rick Stein was famous. There's a little place in Padstow now called Prawn on the Lawn. They've also got one in Islington. It only seats about 26, 28 people. Serve small plates, sharing plates that you just pick 4 or 5 off a blackboard. I go there probably 2 or 3 times a year, and it's as though I'm the only person who's ever eaten in that restaurant. The same staff have been there now for the last 4 or 5 years. They always greet you as though you're a great friend. The food is stunning as well, and that's what I want when I go out nowadays most of the time. I live in Taunton. There's a pub in Taunton called the Ring of Bells. Matt, who's the landlord there, he runs that pub from the front door. So he knows everybody who's coming into the property. He controls the whole thing from the front door. He walks around as well. He's a management by walking about sort of person. Since COVID, they've stopped serving drinks at the bar. So nobody can stand at the bar and drink. That everyone's at a table, and he's got a big outside area as well. And there's 2 areas of restaurant, and it is chock-a-block most of the time. And he has managed, by not having people standing at the bar waiting for drinks, having them all served quickly. He's probably, I think he was telling me at one point, he'd increased his turnover probably by a third, and he was employing a third more staff as well now. So he's giving more jobs because he's offering a better service. And if it hadn't been for COVID, he'd probably never even thought about not having people standing at the bar. And people queuing
Fascinating.
was actually stopping him serving things. So
Yeah, that's strange, because there's been a big debate lately about queuing at bars, hasn't there, and people standing in line and sort of ruining the experience for a lot of diners. So yeah, he's ahead of the curve there.
Yeah, he was. I think it was Harry's in Exeter. I only discovered a little while ago. Really thought that was a great place. I definitely would go.
Yeah,
back.
we spoke to Sam Pounds on the previous podcast, so that's very timely.
No,
Yeah.
Well, we were thinking of going to Exeter versus Blackpool tomorrow, but the weather's not looking very good. So my wife comes from Blackpool, so
Oh, right.
Harry's on the way. So where else locally do we?
You said to me, actually, contextually, you said, because I asked you about your favourites, and you actually told a fascinating story about something fairly simple in Italy, I think it was, where it's about as much about the experience as the food and the content.
Yeah,
so tell us about that.
I'm going back 20, 30 years now, and this is where I say you remember things and people. But this one, I can actually remember the food as well. On holiday in Italy, it was a friend's 40th birthday, and there were a number of us there, but we went out on our own. Little mama and a papa, just traditional Italian restaurant by the church, the sun's shining, very basic plate of pasta with sage and lemon butter, a bottle of wine, but perfect because everything came together. We were both in a good mood. We'd had a nice drive. We were in the soft top car. We were having a good day with lovely lunch. It was so good. We went there again 2 days later. It was just, those moments don't happen very often. I can still remember when I didn't have much money and when I was starting this industry. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I was 24, 25. First time I went to Chewton Glen, and I can still remember the turbot à la nage I ate on that day at Chewton Glen. It was the most magical plate of food I'd ever eaten. Now, on this occasion, I can't tell you about the service, but I can tell you about the food. But an awful lot of time, it's the service that makes it for me. I was at trying to do this without naming them. I was at it was Michelin-starred restaurant in the Southwest a number of years ago. Very famous, very good chef. Great food with my wife and 2 friends, and we ended up after it saying, I can't remember what we ate because we'd been so annoyed by the sommelier, the wine waiter, who insisted on spending 5 minutes at each wine with the wine flight telling us all about the grains of soil it was grown in. And we ended up, we just switched off in the end.
Yeah.
Because he didn't understand, even though we'd sort of said to him, look, no, we don't need to know that. No, every time a new wine came, it was based on that. So I still tell that story. You know?
Sure, yeah, that's very interesting. It sounds to me you still hold a great deal of faith in the hospitality industry, because it gets a few brickbats along the way, but you're passionate about it and you do believe it has a future.
Definitely, yeah. We all want to go out and enjoy ourselves wherever it is and at whatever level it is. Whether you can only go to one of my favourite restaurants is still Pizza Express. Whatever level you want to eat at, people will always want to go out and enjoy things. People always have a birthday. Every day of the week, somebody's got a birthday. One of the big difficulties in this industry at the moment is trying to find, if your birthday's on a Monday or a Tuesday or a Sunday night, where do you go and eat? If I was opening a restaurant now, I'd only open it on a Sunday night, Monday and Tuesday. Because so many people have birthdays on those days and they can't find anywhere to eat.
Good point.
It is a great industry. It does get a lot of flack. I believe you're going to be talking to Stuart Matheson about this at some point.
I am.
It is an industry which has no glass ceilings. You can come in, like me, at 4 O levels, left school, ended up as managing director of the Memoir Cat Saison. It's a meritocracy, I suppose. It is one of those industries. You can come in, you can travel the world in it, you can get transferred, especially if you're in one of the big multinational companies. You can see the world, you see so much, and you learn so much as you go along as well. And it also happens at quite an early age. So you can be earning quite high money at an early age. I know everyone says, oh, it's all minimum wage, but it's not all minimum wage. It doesn't take long for you to get up to a level where you're earning really good money. And a lot of people can come in without going to university, so it's vocational training rather than university education. We need university people as well, but we need a mixture. And those vocational people come in and they're earning whilst they're learning, and that's where they then do rise really well. And it's why before Brexit we got an awful lot of people from Europe who came over to work in hospitality in this country, because they were able to move up in the industry quite quickly, and probably quicker than they could have done in their home countries, and could then go back and into higher positions in their home countries once they'd worked over here. So yeah, I don't think hospitality will ever disappear. I just think it's going to have a very hard time for the next few years, and some of the new national insurance increases and the costs that are being put on hospitality are really quite staggering at the moment.
Well, thank you, Philip. That's a wonderful conclusion. I think we all still hold out lots of hope, and I'm very grateful for you for sharing your insight, but most of all sharing your passion. It's been fascinating to talk to you, and thanks for sparing the time to tell us your view on the industry during this podcast.
Thanks, Andy. It's been a pleasure to be at your table.
And now time for our Whoop and Whinge of the Week feature, where we shine a spotlight on the good and maybe perhaps the not so good of our dining out or hospitality experiences of late. Always start with the good news, I reckon. I don't want to come across as a whinger too much, so here's my whoop. Went to a restaurant recently, and maybe not an uncommon occurrence to have them a little understaffed. I get how difficult it is out there at the minute, but there was a recognition of that. Sorry guys, we're a little bit busy. Can we get you a free drink while you're waiting? Now, I know they can't do that for everybody, but I think they'd obviously recognised they were a little bit behind the 8 ball that night, and it just took the tension out of the situation. I am a bit jumpy when it comes to waiting staff not getting to me and asking me what I want, but that simple act relaxed me into my seat, sat there, enjoyed my free drink, and we were very happy to order at leisure and understand and appreciate that the team were a little bit under the pump. Whinge of the week, sort of flip of the same coin really. Arrived at a restaurant recently, fully expecting to enjoy my experience. Only person there when I arrived, because it was an early lunch booking. Member of staff just lingered a little bit too long maybe at the counter with their back to me doing something on the phone, and I thought, okay, do I have to do the comedy cough to announce my arrival? Bless her, she did finally turn around and was very friendly and efficient and took me to my table. And as I sat there, she did offer me a drink, so that's great, and I declined because I wanted to wait for my companion. But then I heard her walk across the restaurant a couple of minutes later, attempting to find an NHS dentist on the phone. I get it, you know, people have the need to find an NHS dentist, and Lord knows it's pretty difficult at the minute, but do you have to do it when you're at work and you've got a customer in the place? It seemed slightly bizarre to me, and I wasn't a massive fan of that. You know, the service experience is very important, and that was a very bad impression. And very sad, really, because the whole of the rest of the experience was great. Good food, generally good service, fantastic atmosphere in there once it started filling up. But, you know, I've got that memory now of the waitress who was more interested in her teeth than me, which is not a good experience to have. So there's our little whinge. I'm sure lots of people will take issue with me in the fact that she should be able to do that. Maybe not, but yeah, it's not what I wanted to experience, to be honest with you. So that's it for this week. Thanks for listening. Hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have doing it. We look forward to getting your company the next time around, when we'll be talking to another fantastic hospitality provider from the Southwest. You can find out more about the show by visiting www.atmytablesouthwest.co.uk, or find us on various socials as @mytablesouthwest. And we'd love to hear from you as well. If you've got some ideas and recommendations for the show, do please email us via atmytablesouthwest@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and look forward to your company next time around.